Well, in case you're wondering where Ollie is, and that should be Ollie, not Olkey. There you are, Ollie at the bottom, and it's still wrong. It's Ollie and Stan. And the reason it's wrong is because we get everything wrong, Ollie and Stan. And the old boy is back there fiddling around trying to find some milk for the coffee.
Not so much the old boy. I'm younger than you are.
He says he's younger than I am, but then sometimes they say that the older the wine, the more wisdom there is. So it will get him either way. Anyway, he's here. Don't worry. The dreadful duo will be on deck. But I'm going to shock the hell out of him to begin with, because I'm going to start with this.
Well done, the energy companies. They're full of bright ideas to help their customers. Now they've made power so expensive that for an average house such as this, you can't afford to heat it. So you don't need appliances such as this. But that means you also don't need a fridge, because you can keep your groceries cool and fresh without it. The house is cold enough. Well done, chaps.
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that is upsetting me about the energy companies is I've been the same one for a number of years, and they were always very civilized and very helpful, and now they suddenly not been. They are fighting their corner, and as a consequence, they've started to do what the big boys did, and that is forget their customer base. They're no longer nice and pleasant and helpful. It's curt and get off the pot and stop bothering us with things which we don't think that you should be bothering us about anyway. So the power companies are not number one with me at the moment, I'm afraid. No, indeed, they are not. Now, let's, while we're waiting for him, let's take a look at the newspaper headlines this morning. And first of all, where are we? We're out of Mirador Television is out of Lewes in East Sussex, but we broadcast to the world. And I put up one of my rants this morning when I first got out of bed at 6 o'clock, and the first response was from the tip of the west coast of Canada, from Victoria in British Columbia, which is the capital city of British Columbia, not Vancouver, as many believe. Vancouver is a major city because it's the bigger, but the capital is actually Victoria. So there you are. That's how far we stretch, 5,000 miles at this hour of the morning. So if you think that we're just talking about local and parochial stuff, forget it. But one thing that did occur overnight, last night, is that the England rugby team are training in Brighton, God forbid. And they are staying at a hotel called the Harbour Hotel, I understand. And there was a fire, and they all had to trot out, presumably in their boots and their shorts. And Eddie, I keep wanting to say Eddie George, the manager, Eddie, is trotted out ahead of them and made sure that they got out all right. Eddie Jones, looking after his chickadees. Not this weekend is the start of the Six Nations, but the weekend afterwards, when we take on the old enemy, Scotland. So that'll be a good start to the Six Nations and something I'll look forward to, whether you're a rugby fan or not. Normally, a lot of people will watch who aren't rugby fans because it is an exciting occasion. It's an exciting tournament. In the meantime, I understand from a very quick look at BBC this morning that Derby County, a very famous old club, is in trouble and has gone into administration. But I'm surprised that more people haven't actually gone into administration with everything that's happened with lockdown, because the government's support has been very haphazard, and now they're beginning to investigate fraud because a lot of the people that they've helped have trotted off with their pockets jammed full with pound notes, and they didn't deserve it. So that really is the local news. With the weather, it started off quite mild this morning at 4 degrees, but it's only going to reach 7. And we have got a light cloud, a light breeze, and the chances of rain is at some stage 7%, which is almost none. So it's going to be much the same as it was yesterday. So do wrap up, but you don't have to take a brolly. It's all right. It's not going to rain. Famous last words. If it does, you can come and hit me over the head. All right, indeedy. Let's take a look at the newspapers. Oh gosh, Ollie has turned up with the coffee. You can see the motion just on the other side.
I'll take charge now.
All right, okay, here he comes. He's going to tell us what's what and who's who. But first of all, let's take a quick flip through the newspapers, because one of the things that I'm really fed up with, and actually, God bless him, Ollie came in this morning, and his first question was, do you really think that the Russians are going to tip over into Ukraine and we'll be at war? Thank God for Ollie, because everybody else is stuffing their face with cake at number 10. What the hell? Okay, the principle may be important, but nobody seems to take this question of a threat from Russia seriously. That's because nowadays, a lot of our population are getting like the Americans. They don't go anywhere, possibly because of lockdown, but we've become a navel-gazing nation, and we're not taking much notice of what's happening in the rest of the world. So stuff the cake at number 10, and let's keep our eye on Ukraine for a little bit until at least we are sure that the danger is over. So God bless him, he got it right. And as a reward, the first paper that is reviewed this morning is the Financial Times.
Of course.
Of course, his old stomping ground. What is it the Financial Times saying is Johnson gears up for survival fight as Gray hastens to release findings. So that's the Gray report, where they've been looking at things. And now that the Met are involved, I mean, for God's sake, all over a Christmas cake. It wasn't a Christmas cake. Yes, it was a Christmas cake. Yes, we do need to look at these things, but we've got to get our priorities right. The economy is in trouble. Inflation is starting to gallop. The cost of living is going up. Apparently, just even last weekend, for your Sunday roast, if you wanted it, lamb and beef were up about 10% in price, and so were vegetables and other household items and used cars.
Actually, Ollie, Stanley, who's the only other Prime Minister to be investigated while in office?
Blair?
Yes.
Yes.
Bing. Your stars
right.
of a 10.
Yeah, right.
You know that was about, don't you? It was the old Lloyd George things. Honours, pay for honours.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
And
I wonder how much it cost him to get his knighthood.
Well, exactly. Isn't it? I mean, isn't it funny how the world turns in that little bubble? I've often thought, Ollie, the gongs that are handed out is they all get together and they say, who's going to have the gongs? And they talk to each other. They don't talk to anybody else. No. I mean, basically, I think what they do is they go through the telephone book and they say, here's a lollipop lady, let's give her a bit of a, but generally speaking, these honours are just, I'm all for people being rewarded for what they do. But really, I mean, you can hear, particularly if you're sitting on a plane traveling to somewhere where the civil servants are going, and you can hear them discussing who is going to get what and why they should. Yeah, well done, chaps. You can sit down and look at your honours all between yourselves. Anyway, the Metro. Now, here is the bill. And that's a reference to the fact that Scotland Yard has now got involved in this cake issue at number 10. Well, are we going to send the coppers out to the eastern Ukraine, an area, I may say, that I'm slightly familiar with because I've worked there? Or are they going to actually go to number 10 and then find out who baked the cake?
Of course they are. They're going to nip inside and say, can I have a piece of cake, please?
Right, absolutely.
You know our Metropolitan Police.
Yeah. Now tell me this. If Boris came down this very moment and offered you a piece of Christmas cake, would you take it?
Probably not. I'll give it to the dog.
I don't have a dog. Who should I give it to?
You got a
cat? Well, I don't even have a cat anymore, although I've been an animal lover all my life. Actually, we both, you said that, and I'm going to ask you about it in a minute. You said you went and saw the film Belfast last night, and we both served in Northern Ireland as journalists. In the period of 1970 to 1985 or thereabouts, were the height of the Troubles, when they were really bad. So you've seen the movie, but the fact of the matter is that here's another area of concern where they're getting a petition calls for the Department Works and Pensions or something. We'll get that in a minute. But here's another area that is becoming unstable because of all the silly nonsense of Brexit. I just don't understand it, because on the one hand we get Good Friday agreements which try to calm everything down, and then we get involved in some unseemly row with the EU, which destabilizes the whole thing again. Do you understand it, Ollie?
Yes, I do. I mean, the fact is, it's got a land border, hasn't it? And people, if they're still in the EU, everything they can go trade through Northern Ireland, and the Irish people wouldn't like that, not one little bit, you know.
Well, now the word. I mean, I've got relatives there, as you know. My daughter lives there because we took her there with us. She was 11 when she went to Northern Ireland. Well, a little over 12, 13. So she grew up there, married there, produced my 2 grandsons there, and so on. And she's got her ear fairly close to the ground. And she says that there is a considerable concern, particularly amongst the middle classes, who really don't get involved in the Catholic Protestant thing as much as the others.
Protestants.
Sorry?
The middle classes are Protestants. Generally speaking.
Generally speaking. But she says that there is now much feeling that perhaps the solution is for it to be all Ireland.
Well, that's interesting, because the polls have suggested that it should be about all Ireland, and that would be a bit. You see, back in the past, there was a 2-to-1 majority in favour of Protestants, but of course the Catholics breed heavily, don't they? And they more or less caught up with the rest of it. Secondly, the business class, the middle class, do not want the militias rising up again to spoil their nice living, the quality of their lives, because it's been going for so long. And the thing is that if the trade agreement allows certain things to come through, then does it go across the border to Ireland?
Well, I mean, it is a very interesting situation, because if you listen to so-called strong loyalists, they still would give you the impression that Northern Ireland wants to stay part of the United Kingdom. I'm not going to get into the arguments of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I remember once when I was back there and I was talking to a very, very liberal Protestant councillor, Chris Grimsey was his name. And I said, why don't you like them? Because you think they're all bog-eating potatoes down south. He said, it's not a question of that. It's just not my country. You see, it goes back to 1789, doesn't it? You know, whenever they were sent over there, Scottish people sent over there, and it was a plantation, and they enjoyed. You know, we know both in the story, and frankly, to your viewers, you really got to go to Belfast to begin to understand sectarianism.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult. I mean, these lifelong grudges that people like Ian Paisley used to have, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's an awful lot. Eventually, it gets down to Brits and non-Brits and so on and so forth. But in the last 5 years, my wife and I lived on a farm. We didn't farm, but it was a 150-acre farm, which is quite large for smaller farms in Northern Ireland. And we had a cottage right in the middle of the farm, and it was absolutely delightful. But there was what we call the guest house, but it was the original house, and in it was a Bible of 1812, dated 1812. And of course, that's when a lot of the emigration took place from Scotland to Northern Ireland, and that's where a lot of the trouble started. It was the Scots.
They very much identify with the Unionist in Scotland. In Scotland, if you remember, there's the same kind of divide. The Rangers are heavily Protestant, and Celtic are heavily Catholic. So another blooming war going on there if you follow football.
Absolutely, but also the Orange Lodge, which is one of the those I won't say secret societies, but Masonic type organisations. The Orange Lodge is very strong in Northern Ireland, and it is very strong in Scotland.
It is very strong.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, talking of the Scots, come on, what was last night?
Last night,
Yes.
Burns night.
Ah, right. And did you go burning?
No, I went to the pictures. I told you.
Well, I thought you might have gone on a bit of,
Well, I know.
bit of haggis afterwards.
Well, yeah, but this is not New York. It's not a 24-hour city, you know.
Well, I was talking to Jane Watkins, who was bringing us up to date on what's happening with the production of Macbeth in Hastings yesterday, and she was actually going off where she'd helped organise a Burns dinner, and Burns dinners are very popular all over the world. It's quite amazing.
What are Burns dinners?
Yeah.
Oh, well, of course they are. Yeah. I mean, I've been to loads and loads and loads.
Yeah, but we didn't have one to go to last night.
No.
Do you think that people are picking on us? Do you think there's some discrimination?
I think so. There's sectarianism going on there.
But I did relate to her that on one occasion I was working in Basel or Basel, depending on which language you're speaking, in Switzerland. And the liaison officer for the bank, I was doing some filming for the bank, and he was very heavily involved with Scottish bands, Scottish type bands in Switzerland, in Basel.
What's the bands?
Strike It Up with a pipe maker, right? Yeah. And he said, I've got a very special lunch for you tomorrow. So off we trotted to the, I think it was the Hyatt or Hilton or whatever. And we went into a private dining room, and suddenly a piper came in, and the chef followed him. And here it was haggis, tatties, neeps, and a wee dram. And I had a cameraman who was a Frenchman and a sound man who was a German. The Frenchman sat stoically and sort of looked, never touched any of it. The German went green and raced out through the door.
What you overlooked is the oyster fry.
Well, now there we are.
Yeah. It was a very good scene. Oyster fry is a fry up of, bacon, eggs, tomatoes, all in done in a huge gravy and the very pale face in Northern Ireland, and I was always thought it was due to the fry because it was so bad for your cholesterol and all the rest of it.
Absolutely, cholesterol. And with it was fadge. Do you remember fadge? Yeah. Which is a sort of a potato bread, I suppose you would call it. Yes, the Ulster fry.
It sounds very, very, very much since our day, though. Like you, I used to live near Portaferry in an old council house, which was on the sea, sort of thing.
Yeah, a delightful little village, I may say.
It is, get away from all the problems of being in Belfast and all that kind of thing. And what was I going to say? It was just very, very nice to Portaferry. Again, Portaferry is Catholic, and the whole Argos Peninsula is Protestant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And in fact, the ferry, which goes across, it's only about 3/4 of a mile, but there is a very, very heavy tide rip, very, very strong tide.
There's a 10-knot tide rip out of Strangford Lough. I used to take boats out, for fishing boats out, really. And we used to go out, and once we went over to Peel in I found out about late in the day that the people aboard were prison wardens. I thought, oh my God, what have I done now, for God's sake? Next bloody boat is going to have an IRA bomb on it.
Well, in my very early days in Northern Ireland, I was taken to Portaferry by my colleagues at the BBC. A very nice meal we had at the Portaferry Hotel, which is very, very ancient, of course. But we got onto the last ferry to go home, and managed to climb to the top and sang all the way back. And I remember that Gloria Hunniford and Sean Rafferty and several other very well-known people at the time. I don't think that Jeremy Paxman was there. He was in Northern Ireland at that time. I don't think he was at that particular party. But here we were singing "Nearer My God to Thee" as we went over on the ferry, and it has to go way up river.
Because of the tides, it has to go right over there. Imagine trying to get a boat back in the what's it?
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you almost end up in Scotland when the tide is going that way.
Talking of Scotland, if any of you haven't read it, get it. Because it's on Amazon. I think it's on Amazon, isn't it? It's The Friends of Rathlin Island, written by a very well-known author who is sitting to my left or my right. Yeah, my left. Yeah. It is a very, very good read. Before I even met Stuart, I think it was when I was in Kosovo, and you read a lot when you're away on your own, and the television is in some foreign language. And I think I read it there. But it's a very, very good read. The Friends of Rathlin Island. And when he's talking about Portaferry and so on, is Rathlin Island is actually an island that is equidistant between Scotland and Northern Ireland, and has a tremendous history, not least of which is there is a cave there where Robert the Bruce watched the spider. Yeah. And as the spider went up, is at first you do not succeed, try again.
Yeah, but it was all kinds of legends, wasn't it, about sorry boy MacDonald there trying to avoid Elizabeth. All his children and the kids and the women on over there, and they're all thrown off the
cliffs. That's right, yeah.
And also, you say it's actually 5 miles and 8 miles to the Mother's Island.
Right.
So let me quickly tell the viewers my own little story about that. Okay. I started writing the book because I was moonlighting from the Financial Times doing an MPhil, which is an MA.
What?
At Queen's Russia. Finally, I got so fed up to going to these things, and I decided I would turn the thing into a novel for the Friends of Rathlin Island. And Rathlin Island in those days, had 105 people living on it. 100 of them were Catholic, and one family was Protestant. And this was the island which was in Ian Paisley's constituency, was then MP. We always used to joke, like, on Rathlin, there were 2 churches and only 1 graveyard. So it was the only place in Northern Ireland when you're born as a Catholic, born as a Protestant, and buried as a Catholic. There's only 1 graveyard. And I thought, if they can come together, because the Catholics would go into the Protestant church for Harvest Festival. So if they can get together on a small island, why can't they do it in the rest of the world? Yeah. And that was the whole basis of the book.
Of course, at one time, there was a lighthouse there. I assume it's still there. It became automated. But for a long time, it had lighthouse keepers, didn't it? Yeah. And they would actually switch every 6 months or so, as I recall. The other thing is that if you have a decent lobster, the chances are that it's caught by a fisherman from Rathlin Island. Yeah. I mean, it's the only time that I've watched with dismay, because I love lobster, the fishermen throwing back a lobster of a pound because they thought it was too small to sell.
Yeah. Really.
So get his book. I have to ask you, because you actually trying to get hold of you, except on a Wednesday, first thing in the morning, is impossible. Not because you're still in bed, but because what you're doing is you're writing. Now, what's on the cards? What's the next book?
Oh, it's my memoir, my autobiography.
Ah, well, now, for those of you who don't know, I'll get you. Where have you been? This is so fascinating and exciting. I know you've been to 60 or 70 countries, but you were actually, in the Far East, weren't you?
95, actually.
95 countries, right, there we go. Right. I didn't know that was that many countries in the world. Go on.
There are actually 216 registered at Edmonton. Can't get all of them.
You're quite right. But if you're going to tell everybody your story, to me the most fascinating part of your life was not Northern Ireland, but it was in the Far East during the which war?
Vietnam.
Right, the Vietnam War, and really, I think that when you get to that, it's fascinating because nowadays you can talk to people of 40 or 50, and they barely remember anything to do or with the Second World War, mention the Vietnamese War, they look at you with they have no idea what you're talking about. And in fact, the Korean War, even more so. And if a lot of people will watch the American comedy MASH, and they have no idea what that war was about.
Right. Well, look, I think the difference between that and any other wars is it was the first television war. Okay.
But the Korean War or the Vietnamese
the Korean
War?
War was the forgotten war.
Yeah, right.
And Vietnam became the first television war. Now, what happened towards the end was that the offensive of 1968 was supposed to be, they took over, the North Vietnamese took over 81 towns and villages. And they thought there would be general uprising, there wasn't. And people were watching the television at night in the States and saying, what the hell is this? We're told we're winning this war. And there they are, these little yellow men in our embassy. And that really sparked off towards the end of the war. And it really, there was a famous metaphor, it's read by Graham Greene, whose book was called, what was it called? Graham Greene's.
Yes, right. The Honourable something was it?
No, that was Macari. What the
It'll come back to us in a minute. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Tell me this, because one thing that I have forgotten. Was it Johnson who actually pulled America out of the President Johnson pulled America out of the Vietnam War?
Johnson was the ones who put the American troops in.
Right.
They put in 500,000 when they thought they were losing.
Right.
And then what happened? When after the Tet thing, he became unelectable, and Nixon got in, didn't he? And then he withdrew everybody and the rest of it.
Right.
That was more or less the end.
Right. So if you think that I'm paranoid, because at the moment there is great tension between the Russian Federation, basically the EU, NATO, and ourselves. Now, we're part of NATO, but we're no longer part of the EU. And the Americans are now on alert. Is remember that there are wars that everybody has forgotten so far, and they may come bounding back at us because they were real wars and we were involved. There were British national servicemen went to Korea. Some of our journalists went to Vietnam, and there have been various brush fire wars in between, such as Afghanistan and so on. We tend to think that they are away from us. But this one is coming very close to home. And what are we doing? Worrying about a bloody birthday cake. And The Guardian is the PM's peril report. Report looms as the police step in over parties. So we've got the police involved. We've got an inquiry. You name it. Everybody gazing in their navel. Well, I'm quite sure that Putin is sitting there smirking and sort of saying, they're all so wrapped up in this bloody birthday cake issue that they're not noticing that we're massing troops on the border. And I really feel sorry for the military, because they're trying hard to warn us all, and everybody's sort of saying, bugger off. We're not paying any attention to you. It's much more interesting as to what Boris got up to with his birthday cakes.
I think what Putin's trying to do is to reassemble the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, in other words. He did this in Tajikistan, tried to do it in Georgia, didn't work there. Ukraine is rather different because it is much more of a gateway into the wider world. Ukraine's got ports and that kind of thing, warm water ports and that kind of thing. And I got the feeling in my bones that Putin will draw back. You see, Russia does have gold and nickel and some other minerals, but it's really a failed state in many ways because it's almost totally dependent on gas and oil. That's what it is. Well, look what happened with Iran when they got uppity. There were embargoes, and they embargoed worked. Yeah, it did work.
Yeah.
I mean, putting in these restrictions on Russia is a different kettle of fish because there's so many of them, compared to Ukraine. But it could very well happen. I mean, the Americans might decide that we can't stand idly by.
as
And
they
don't
have done
forget,
in the past.
a lot of all the British people always moan about Britain being late in the game in the Second World War, because once Truman came in, that was okay, but Roosevelt would not send troops to war because it was a secular country in those days, America. None of their business and so on. And they were very late in, but they were absolutely necessary because Montgomery couldn't do it on his own. But it was very. What doesn't work, Keith, obviously now, is country formation. That goes back right to the Philippines, which was actually a Catholic country, and the Americans ran it, and they tried to impose the same kind of structure that there was in the States: a Senate, a House of Representatives, and they would vote and so forth and so on, because it doesn't work in that kind of country. They're not used to it. Now look what you're having here. America was trying to form a new nation in Vietnam, okay? But it finally ended up that all the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese wanted was to have their country back. Afghanistan, they didn't want to export terrorism. And compared with Afghanistan, who wants its own country, or the extremist Taliban does, but it also exports terrorism and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
So again, it was country formation not working. But in this case, Vietnam was one thing and Afghanistan is another. In terms of all they wanted is their country back, and look how they flourished in terms of economic.
Now, it's been a few years since I've been to the United States. I mean, at least 6 or 7. One of the things that astonished me was that almost every delicatessen is Vietnamese.
Absolutely.
And the Americans have embraced the Vietnamese very fondly. In fact, rather more than they have the Chinese and other
the
Asian
Chinese,
countries.
they were bored over the centuries.
Yeah.
The thing about the Chinese is they're a little bit like the Japanese, really. Actually, very interestingly, Japan and Vietnam had the same kind of Buddhism, or didn't dominate Japan completely. They have what's known as the Mahayana Buddhism, which is like the Baptist people here, whereas Cambodia had Theravada Buddhism, which is like higher Anglican and that kind of thing.
Right.
And the American entry into Vietnam was a mistake, and I think that when Graham Greene wrote his book, The Quiet American, it was called.
Right.
He said there was about a third aid worker who wanted to find a neutral politics party. He said, I never knew anybody that had such good reasons for all the damage that it caused. And that just sums up the whole Vietnamese intervention.
Yeah. But militarily, the Americans were a bit foolish, weren't they? Because the Vietnamese had already seen off the French. Dien Bien Phu.
Yeah. But no, what you got to understand, you get military here now. There's a huge landed front line, basically, right down from the Mekong Delta, right up through Laos, right? It's not defensible. It's not defensible with what they have. You could bomb until you're mad. You could bomb, but it needed, like the Viet Cong had the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was, they used to ride their bikes and feed bloody Saigon and so forth. And so it's like Dien Bien Phu. And they lost. And for really, the Americans weren't used to losing. They didn't like it.
Yeah.
And they turned very nasty to Vietnam after the war, stopping all trade and all the rest of it and so forth.
Yeah.
But
and yet now the American population have embraced the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting how our leaders sometimes get out of touch with the average bloke on the street. In fact, I think that's what we're facing in the United Kingdom right now. But that's another debate.
There was some quiet moments which were really quite funny. As the North Vietnamese advanced, it was the North Vietnamese, not the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong were wiped out in 1968. But the last week before, in 1975, before the airport closed, He said to all the deserters who'd gone up into the hills to marry hill tribe wives and all that kind of thing, they would marry them at the airport. And I was walking about, and in that week I had 17 proposals of marriage. And I had to say to the bar girls who wanted to marry them, get married to me, I said my 4 words of Vietnam, which was Bao Chi and Quoc, English journalist. And they had their own languages, bar girls. They said, you're number 10, you're number 10,000. And they had this lovely song, because one of the big things is that Harold Wilson didn't put troops into Vietnam.
Right.
With the University of Open University, I think they were his 2 greatest achievements. And the thing was that where was I? Sorry, Wilson, that's a digression. So anyway, and then after this, us English journalists were allowed to stay on. The American journalists were told there'd be a bloodbath, so they left. So there were a lot of French guys, there was a lot of Japanese that they weren't going to take out anyway. And the reason to leave, to go to the helicopters or the buses down to the port, was the first few bars of White Christmas by Bing Crosby. And the Japanese friend, my friend Watanabe-san, he says, Dobe-san, please do sling for me White Christmas. And then it got even funnier, because the people who stayed on, there was a bloodbath at Da Nang in the north, and we were very lucky to get out of that. But in Saigon, they left us alone, because the spies there said to the North Vietnamese, it's over, you won. There's no need to have a bloodbath. Yeah. So we were in luxury for about a month, because we got a hold of the Standard Bank club room, and one of their employees used to bring us lunches every day. Then after a month, they flew us up to Laos, and I got an email there. I was one of the first undergraduates at Sussex University, and some of my peer group went to America to actually make their fortunes. And I got an email from one of them. My butler said, there was an article in Time magazine. And he said, is it true that you fell asleep and got pissed? I said, that's true, yeah. And then the Viet Cong were knocking on your door the next morning. I said, that wasn't true, but what a wonderful story. I think we'll go with that version.
Right, well, we'll move on from a war that most people that watching us don't remember. And we'll go back to the silly nonsense that's going on in our own country. The Times, Johnson faces police interview over parties. I mean, for God's sake, you're going to be interviewed over a Christmas party. Mirror, numbers up PM. Well, the Mirror is going to have a real go at him. And the Star, plonker. The Star gets right through to it. Plonker. And they're really talking about a Boris sort of screwing everything up at the moment. And the Sun, hello, Bojo. More play on the fact that the coppers are marching into number 10. And the Daily Express is actually, the Daily Express is always very kind to the government, and Boris particularly. And it says, yes, PM, we all want a line drawn under Partygate. And what it's really saying is, hey, listen, we've got much more important things to look at. And I must confess, if there's anything that's upsetting me, is to see the great and the good pouncing around over this issue, when we've got real issues with mental health, we've got issues with the homeless, we've got issues with the economy, we've got, and particularly in your area, inflation sort of threatening to get out of hand, the cost of living rising and so on. And what are we worrying about is a bloody cake in number 10. And the Express is saying that. And then the Daily Mail, who are not always kind to Boris, their headline is, a nation that lost all sense of proportion. And they are saying more or less the same thing with me, is here there are nuclear missiles, thousands of troops, MiGs and all sorts of things lined up on the Ukraine border, and we are all getting our knickers into a twist over what's happening in number 10. I am not saying that what's happening at number 10 is not important, but we've got to keep our eye on world events. We can't keep looking at our own
What
issues.
is really, really pissed people off is this: one rule for one lot, another rule for us. Is another class issue, basically.
Well,
there's one rule for the elite or the rich people, and there's another one for us peasants. And it's not fair.
No, it's not.
And then finally, when they upset the Queen, or maybe she wasn't upset, when the Queen's sitting alone, you don't mess with them, but the Queen.
No.
I mean, she's so highly popular. You don't start knocking her about.
We don't disagree on that, Ollie. All I'm saying is that, as the Mail has said this morning, there's a sense of proportion. We become so obsessed with it, is nobody's paying attention to what's going on in the rest of the world. And if we start to do that, then we're inviting trouble on ourselves, because it'll catch up with us. Anyway, I'm going to play something, and then we're going to go to your favorite.
Well done, the energy companies. They're full of bright ideas to help their customers. Now they've made power so expensive that for an average house such as this, you can't afford to heat it. So you don't need appliances such as this. But that means you also don't need a fridge, because you can keep your groceries cool and fresh without it. The house is cold enough. Well done, chaps.
Okay,
well,
that's your bailiwick. Bring us up to date.
Right. Well, Martin Lewis, who is the TV pundit about personal finance and energy ridiculous things, and he's terribly upset. Now, when they said our 3-bedroom house, Ofgem sets the price twice a year, once in October 1 and April 1. In 2021, let's cut to the chase. There was a 10% increase in April and a 12% increase in October. That means 22% up. And that left an average tariff for average 300 hours was, I think, 2,677. Yeah, I think that's right. And he said that it's going to get worse. And by April 1, they'll put it up by another 700. So that gets you to around £2,000 for an average 3-bedroom house. A lot of people can't afford that. They can't afford it, simply that. And he said, the way inflation is going, those who don't starve to death will freeze to death. And that is true. People I spoke to are really worried about how they're going to pay the bills, how they're going to keep the heating coming.
Yeah.
And the government doesn't make it any easier, saying that you've got to get rid of gas boilers and have something like an air-fueled heat pump. Well, air-fueled heat pump costs 10 grand to start, and then we put the rest of it in, more radiators, because air-fueled heat pumps don't sustain the hot water as well as the gas does. And therefore, you're talking a bill of about, 13,000 quid.
Well, the popularity of the Green Party is interesting, isn't it? Apparently, it is growing exponentially as these crises hit. I'm not going to make any political comment. We do make these political comments, but why kick something that is new and so on? But the big worry is that it's a one-issue party.
Well, it's not only that. I'm a very green person myself, as you know that. Don't mean I look like a Martian, but anyway. I find the Greens managerially incompetent.
No, he's not. His ears are all right. He's not a Martian.
The Greens are actually managerially incompetent. Now, there was a very interesting article in the New Statesman recently, which says the Greens have missed their chance to become a proper political party in opposition against the Tories. And the reason is they had these terrible leadership issues. Caroline Lucas, the only MP, doesn't want the job. And so they have 2 people who nobody's ever heard of. So they don't have a leader. Now, look, we have a two-party democracy here, okay? But people don't vote for like a 2-party system. They vote like a presidential thing for example, they vote for Boris rather than the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. And the Greens just don't qualify for, there's no one you can actually sort of it means contract difference is whereby if the government and the companies have a certain price, right? They fix a certain price.
Right.
If the gas pipe goes above that agreed price, the state has to give it in money, right? If it goes below, the companies has to give the state back the money, right? Now, that has done terribly well for renewable energy companies, particularly wind farms, because they've got a contract for difference whereby the government has to keep pouring in money because they're very expensive to run or make or do a nuclear point power station is on a contract for difference. So that is what the situation is now, generally speaking. Now, go back to the local politics things, and the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, for example, are interested in climate change and all the rest of it, but they don't really tell you what they're going to do about it. So locally, I've not heard from the Labour Party or the Greens, but the Lib Dems have come up. Ed Davey, the week before, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, he set up a Robin Hood scheme whereby whereby the tariffs would be paid for by the government, or who would be have to pay it. But if locally, James McCleary, the leader of the Lib Dems, he's a Lib Dems parliamentary candidate, but he's no longer head of the district council. That is headed by a Green at the moment. And the thing is that James McCleary said that their council, poor people's council tax, should be abolished while these prices are so high. And that is really quite positive, I think.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Yeah, not a bad idea at all. I mean, is some extreme views, and they may not be extreme, you tell me, is that people are going to enter into starvation, not be able to afford food if they are paying for heat and light. Are we really facing that sort of desperate situation?
If you believe the pundits like Martin Lewis, he's got a very good reputation, and Central System does some very good work about what people should do and what they can't do and so on. And there's other people who are saying that people are worried about their food bills. They're worried. Well, look at energy, for example, is the second largest outgoing after rent or mortgage. It's very expensive energy. And you know why? And I told you this before, because back in the day when privatisation came along, it had set up an oligopolistic cartel, 6 big companies who put the price wherever they felt like it. It's now 5, incidentally, but the government's still giving money to these people, which is a good thing. But I mean, it does work. I mean, the contract for difference does work, as long as you play the game quite successfully.
Rupert Lloyd Thomas, by the way, is watching us, and he just sent a little comment. He's snapping my fingers. He said, "Don't poke the bear." Well, strangely enough, because of my own involvement in Russia, there are a rather large number of Russians, one way or another, who actually do watch us. So I don't know whether this is feeding through what we say to the Kremlin, but certainly there are some Russians that are sitting watching and saying, very interested to hear what you're saying. And actually, if they're nationalistic at all, jingoistic, is they're saying now is the time to strike because everybody's fascinated with the cake. Very interesting what you just said, because I got a letter from the government saying that I could have 145 quid, I think it was, towards my gas thing, and to contact my gas supplier. And now I've been with my gas supplier. I'm not going to name them because I'm so disappointed. The sooner I can get out from under the better. But it's one of the smaller ones that have stayed in business. And they just simply sent an email saying, we closed our applications for this rebate some time ago. And that was it, full stop. So believe me, if they expect any sympathy from me, they're not going to get it. And in fact, quite often, if you send an email, you don't get a reply for months and months and months.
No, you can't speak to them on the phone.
No, but you know how I do it?
Yeah.
I stop my direct debit.
Yeah,
and they're on within literally minutes. Then you can talk to somebody and say why you've done it. And it's easy enough to reinstate it. But out there, if you want to get your energy company or anybody else, credit card company or anybody else, cancel your direct debit. They are on within seconds. The old computer alerts them. Send an email, and they'll wait for a month and then tell you that they didn't get it.
Well, actually, I back in the day, I used to help people by getting their money back. You see, these people, they don't know how much you're going to use, how much you're going to spend. So they do it on estimates. And for example, say last year you said you spent, say, £1,000 on gas and electricity, right?
Yeah.
Then they'll give you that kind of tariff, and then they keep going forward to the year. But supposing this year you've spent two months in Bermuda getting warm, it wouldn't be the same. So they're giving you incorrect what's-its, and they have to give you the money back. Now, trying to get the money out of them is like drawing elephants. And but anyway, I got £345 back from British Gas myself, and I got about £300 back from my then partner. Eventually, I ended up at 2,000 quid for those people. You just got to take them on. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, you know, you and I have lived for many years in a terror stricken society. Yes. And listen, I'll tell you, if the provos want to find out about terror, all they got to do is to come over here and talk to the credit card companies, the local council, and so on and so forth, because that's one of the tactics they use is terror. More people, I'm sure what you're saying is people have come to you and said, I've got this letter from the council, and they threatened to take you to court and so on and so forth. Well, let me tell you that they threatened to take me several times, and I let them. I say to them, please do, because I know what they're not going to. They'll get there, and then they'll try and make a deal with you. But I actually walked into when we could walk in to Southover, and there's a young man that I've known there, and he's sitting there, council official, and I said, look, I've just come to register the fact that I shall be going to court, and he said, what do you mean? So he looked it up and he said, well, there's nothing on your file that says anything about court. And I said, well, I got the letter. And he said, we haven't taken anybody to court in years and years and years. So if they try to terrorize you with that, ignore it. Because, well, don't ignore it, actually, but threaten to turn up. Then they start to pay attention. Our local governance is as out of control as the birthday boy.
Right.
And do you know something? We are now, I have to say, is 8:59. We've only got 1 minute left. What is your last message, Ollie, to your series of viewers this morning, your fans?
Well, I don't know. I think locally here, I would say go with the Lib Dems policy, which is, you know, particularly for cheap and vulnerable people.
Right.
Because you're not going to get any change out of the Conservatives, are you?
Yes. Well, mine is I am becoming fonder and fonder of Marie Antoinette because my message is let them eat cake while the Russians pour over the Ukrainian border. And as I say, I worked and lived in that part of the Ukraine, the very eastern part on the Russian Federation border. So I know a bit what it's like. Frankly, anybody is welcome to it, but that's another story. Let's tell you what. Let's just let's remind people what we're. Right. Now, just a reminder that it's going to be 7 degrees today, a gentle breeze, light cloud, not very much chance of rain, which means it's the sort of day that Ollie tries to pull me to the pub to have great big long discussions. But today I'm going to insist that he has 2 pints just to keep him quiet while we contemplate the state of the world and the state of how cool our houses will be when we get back to them.
Oh, bloody, pulled you to the pub. You overlapped me two circuits running, didn't you?
There we are. That's it from Ollie, and that's it from me. Let's go out gently, because I really do like going out gently after we've had a go at everybody. Toodle pip. Watch for him later in the day. Energy matters, and he will give you the detail of what is happening in the energy sector.
Okay, so it's goodbye for him and goodbye for me.
Doodles.